gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Secretary. The Energy Policy Act of 2005 authorized the Clean Coal Technology Program and certain tax credits to assist development of the next generation clean coal technology, including carbon capture and sequestration. My understanding of what your discussion was earlier this morning with Congressman Doyle was that the DOE believes these projects on carbon capture and sequestration that are currently ongoing reflect technology that is already in or demonstrated as viable for commercial service in coal power plants. Am I correct in my understanding of your previous testimony?
Yes, they are mainly using solvent technologies that have been used before.
So here's the catch-22. I'm not sure I agree with you because also, as Congressman Doyle pointed out, unless you happen to be like the Mississippi facility right down the road from the oil well where you're going to use the carbon to push up the oil, that they may not be commercially viable. But the catch-22 is that if that is accurate, the statute makes it clear that you're not supposed to be giving them money anymore. If they're commercially viable now, they don't need the support from the tax credits, but you're still giving them the tax credits, are you not?
The issue is that this is a system integration issue, pursuing a new deployment of the whole system. So it is I would say quite eligible.
Well, I mean, the problem is it says that this technology has to be well beyond the level that are in commercial service or have been demonstrated as viable for commercial service. So you're in a catch-22 because if they are in fact viable for commercial service, as both you and the EPA submit, I happen to disagree, they're not eligible for the money. If they are commercially viable, they're not eligible for the money. And so I would submit that you all need to figure that one out, either cut the money off or and say that they are commercially viable, or admit that they aren't commercially viable. And I don't know that there's an answer necessary for that, but that's the dilemma that we have, is that if you're following the code, which I always think is the right thing to do, that's why we have a Congress, it's why we pass laws, it's why we have a Senate and a House that pass them and a President signs them, is because we actually mean for people to follow them. If we follow the law, you can't have it both ways. You can't say they're commercially viable, therefore these new regs come into effect, or they aren't commercially viable, therefore they're eligible for the tax credits. I submit they're eligible for the tax credits, but that the EPA's got the cart before the horse and that you need to probably call their hand on it. That being said, let me move on because you can't respond, and I appreciate that, and I understand that. I'm not offended by that. The EIA has reported in February that the number of coal-fired power plant retirements will be higher than originally anticipated, and that an estimated 60 gigawatts of coal-fired capacity will retire by 2020. Notably, EIA expects 90% of the coal-fired capacity retirements to occur by 2016. Now, this means nearly 18% of all coal-fired generation in the United States will retire in the next 2 years due to new regulations. Are you concerned, is the DOE concerned that the loss of these critical generation facilities in such a short time frame will make it increasingly difficult to meet electricity demands as we move forward, putting reliability at risk?
First, I would just comment that I think the market forces with gas cannot also be dismissed in terms of what's happening with coal. But analyses that I have seen suggest that reliability will certainly be preserved if this is what happens over these next years.
Well, and my concern is that I recognize that at some point, because of the regulations, gas is going to surpass coal. I may not like that, but that's where we're headed. And I also recognize that someday the gas may be able to take up that slack. What I'm concerned about is between today and that time period. I'm concerned that next year or in the winter of 2016 that we will see some real problems with this many coal plants being reduced, and I think that DOE ought to be concerned about that as well. Also, with all that new expenditure, closing down facilities, in fact, there are 2 different facilities, 3 different generators, but 2 facilities in my district alone that will be closing down. One of the ones that will close down, which is a 3rd one, or a 4th one, depending on how you count them, that I didn't mention, is converting to natural gas. But with all those expenditures having to be made by the power companies, it is reasonably expected that costs will go up as the power companies recoup their expenditures. Isn't that true?
I assume, I don't know the details of the rate case, but I assume that would be the case.
And let me make an assumption, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I would assume that you all are talking with the EPA about any concerns related to reliability between the present and whenever natural gas can pick up the slack. But if we're going to lose 18% over the next 2 years, that's a pretty significant cliff for the power companies to adjust to, is it not?
And with FERC.
And with FERC, sure. But that's a steep cliff, is it not? 18% coal being gone when it's about 40%.
60 gigawatts to 2020 would be a substantial amount. But again, analyses that have been done suggest that reliability will be preserved. That's also at the ISO level a lot, those calculations.
I hope you're right. I yield back.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. This time recognize the gentleman from Colorado.